Hello and welcome to this second episode of Emily Talks Tech Jobs. I am really excited to be here with Will James today. Will is a talent advisor, career coach, and a senior talent acquisition consultant at the University of Chicago. He's recruited across industries from Google's hardware engineering teams to executive and IT roles in higher ed. Along the way, he's helped organizations build inclusive hiring practices and guided countless job seekers through career transitions. So I'm excited to hear his insights around networking, resumes, and the realities of AI in hiring today. So, Will, thank you so much for being here with us today and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Emily. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, was there anything I missed from your introduction, or maybe could you start by just kind of walking us through your journey through your career from Aerotech to Google to the University of Chicago, and now the support that you're offering to job seekers as a career coach?
Yeah, 100%. So as you mentioned, I started my career at Aerotech, staffing and recruiting. So for those that aren't familiar, Aerotech is a staffing and recruiting agency where they typically focus on contract to hire positions and then some direct placement. For me specifically, I was focused on or industrial roles. And then from there, as you mentioned, I was able to get the great opportunity to work at Google, where I focused on their hardware engineering, specifically for Pixel products. So that included things like RF engineers, antenna, display, and some basic electrical engineers as well. And then from there, ended up taking an opportunity to work here at the University of Chicago, where I recruit across a wide range of industries. I primarily focus on tech roles and higher leadership positions. So that's things like senior director of data strategy, chief privacy officer, just to name a few. But then I also have some accounting positions, for example. So a little bit of everything here at the university. And then outside of that, I also offer career coaching services. So that's
Awesome.
things like resume reviews, mock interview prep. But what I really focus on is working with my clients to gain clarity and a strategy in terms of their job search.
Amazing. What drew you into recruiting in the first place? What did you like about that business area?
Yeah, so it's funny. I would say most folks in recruiting did not go to school for recruiting. I
Mm.
initially went to college for psychology. I wanted to be a therapist. I've always been passionate about helping people. But similar to other college students out there, during my last semester of college, I decided therapy wasn't the best career path for me. But I still wanted to be able to talk to people and help people. And at that time, one of our academic advisors told me about recruiting. And so that's how I landed my first position at Aerotech and how I landed here today.
Oh, wow. So straight from college into Aerotech. I mean, I think I've heard really great things about Aerotech. It's one of the agencies that's really well known in the tech industry.
Mhm. 100%. No, I would say Aerotech is what I describe as a recruiting boot camp. So, they take people with no recruiting experience. It's going to be tough. You're grinding. You're out there hiring, again, contractors, contract to hire. But they really teach you the foundations of recruiting. They give you that good work ethic. They use G2s, which is really just gathering information on phone screens and really make sure that we're representing our candidates to our best ability. So I really attribute my recruiting career and my success to Aerotech.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, the path that you've taken has been so diverse. And actually, I think you had kind of the opposite path that I had. I actually started out in higher ed. It was higher ed administration where I did like a little bit of hiring, but it wasn't the main focus. And then I moved into tech recruiting, and you did it kind of the other way around, tech recruiting and now higher ed recruiting.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So that being said, like what for you, like what are the differences between the two? And like which one stands out to you?
Yeah, they're both unique in their own way. For corporate, I would say it's all about speed to fill, and what I mean by
Mm.
that is how quickly can we get someone in the seat because ultimately it impacts our bottom dollar. Whereas for higher ed recruiting, they're much more intentional about finding the right fit. So regardless of if it takes 3 months, 6 months, they're really going to make sure that they have a good understanding of the skills necessary for this role, some of the soft skills necessary for this role, and really have a vision for where they're looking to go in the future. So again, to summarize, I would say the biggest difference is the speed versus the right fit.
And do you feel more at home in one versus the other?
No, honestly, I would say I would prefer a good mix of
Yeah.
both. Both of them have their own unique challenges. For corporate, it's uh, very data focused or metric focused. So, how many hires can you get within a certain amount of time? And
Mhm.
here, again, it's much more working with hiring managers to truly understand what they need and to really help them build that team. However, things can be a bit slow, a bit too slow, in my opinion, in the higher ed space. So if I could find a middle ground between those two, that would be
Yeah.
ideal. But no, I've enjoyed experiences in both.
Yeah, right. I think, speaking from experience, if you are slow to hire, you end up losing candidates and good candidates too, like the ones you actually want to hire. So,
Exactly, exactly. And that's what I've been able to do at the University of Chicago is really just get them to understand one candidate experience and the availability of candidates on the market. You know,
yeah,
candidates are quick to take the first opportunity that they receive because they have their own bills to pay. You know, and we have to be realistic about that. So if we're taking forever to give candidates feedback or to take them through the process, they're again going to be more attracted to those positions that are moving quicker. You know what I mean? If they
right.
have an offer in hand, why would they turn that down for something that's unsure on our end?
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, one of the reasons that I actually reached out to you. So I reached out to you earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
On LinkedIn, we had a couple of coffee chats, which was amazing. And I was really interested in your background because, of course, we have a similar background, but
Mm-hmm.
especially because you hired for Google.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of the people watching right now, they're looking to get tips because they want to, they want to transition into big companies like that. Like, who doesn't want to work for Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
that being said, like you were the one sitting there in the recruiter's chair, and you were the one, moving people down that pipeline. So that being said, what did you look for in candidates when you were recruiting for Google? If you had to give some advice to our listeners out there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Outside of the general technical skills that we were looking for, so for someone in RF, they need those radio frequency experiences or background. But
Yeah.
beyond that, we also look for creative problem solving. And I would say that's one of the biggest skills that Google is looking for in general. So you may have heard about some of the wild questions that are being asked in Google interviews. Like, let's say we drop you in the middle of Alaska and we want you to build a new Google facility. How would you go about that?
Right.
The reason they're giving you again this wild scenario and not giving you much to work off of is because they want to see how creative are you in terms of your problem solving. Are you
Mm-hmm.
asking the good questions, the right questions, to really find out what you're working with, the reason why they're asking you to build this facility? Are you using your resources effectively? So those are some
Yeah.
of the things that we look for when we were hiring at Google. And then lastly is the growth mindset. So are you someone who understands where they're looking to take their career, who's pretty clear and has that clarity on what they need to do in order to, again, progress in your
Mm.
career? And I would say those are some of the top things that we were looking for outside of the technical skills.
Okay. So when it comes to creativity, I mean, I got the question that you like if we dropped you in the middle of Alaska, and asked you to build a facility, what would you do? So
Mhm.
that's how you get to the bottom of creativity. And then how did you get to the bottom of the career path question? Like what questions were you asking candidates to find out like if they knew what they're doing here?
Mhm. Yeah. So one of the biggest questions that they ask is why Google. First off, and an answer that we get pretty often is because it's Google. We hear great things about Google. Well, yeah, everyone says that. We understand that
Yeah.
Google is great. Everyone wants to work at Google, but what can Google do for your career specifically, and what can you add to Google? So when
Hmm.
candidates said, "Hey, I want to work at Google because it will allow me to have an impact in the consumer electronic space by working on antennas," and I'm just spitballing
Yeah.
here. But if
Yeah.
they
Right.
were
Right.
able to clearly let us know how this role would impact their career trajectory, and again, some of the things that they could, or some of the ways that they could impact Google, that's really what we're looking for. And those types of questions would typically come up in the leadership interview. So you may have heard that the Google interview process consists of 5 steps typically. And so you would have 4 technical interviews, and then you would have that leadership interview.
Okay.
After you've completed interviewing, your interview feedback then goes to a hiring committee where then they assess all of your questions and answers to really make a decision on one, if we should hire you, and then two, the level that we should
Hmm.
hire you. So I would say
Okay.
that's the most nerve-wracking part for both the recruiter and the candidate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have to get 6, 7 people to sign off on hiring you for that position.
Wow. And
Mhm.
then was it, did you have to get 100% yeses in order to hire a person, or could like one person in the hiring committee say no and they would still get hired?
Yeah, it depends on the reason, of course,
Yeah.
but we didn't need to have approval from every single person because that's pretty rare anyway. You know what I
Okay.
mean? To have
Okay.
10 people all agree on one
Hmm.
thing. But if the areas of concern were not major enough where it would cause us to have another interview, sometimes that would happen. So some candidates would get declined at the hiring committee, and we'll have to go and do an additional interview because we didn't talk through a specific required technical skill in that
Hmm.
interview. Then they would need to again have another interview and go back through the hiring committee. But to answer
Hmm.
your question, no, we didn't need to have everyone agree, but we
Yeah.
did need to have majority on the same
Right.
page. So, for example, if we had 4 people in that committee, at least 3 of them would need to be a yes.
Okay, awesome. So then also, I think there are a lot, everybody wants to get into Google. Everybody applies there. It's really competitive. And I think there are a lot of ideas that people have about getting into Google. So what are some of the misconceptions that job seekers have about breaking into Google that you could clear up for us?
Yeah, I would say the biggest misconception is that you have to be some type of unicorn to get into Google.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I never found myself to be a unicorn. I wasn't anything, too special. Of course, I have my strengths, but it's really, again, being able to demonstrate your ability to think creatively, your ability to collaborate with the folks around you, and of course, also have the technical expertise. So I think
Hmm.
that's the major focus is really making sure you have your technical skills squared away and that you've done all the studying and preparing for those interviews, but then also think about times where you've had to be creative in your problem solving.
Hmm.
Ways that you have had to collaborate with others and use limited resources. Because we all know that Google is typically at the forefront of innovation. So they need creative thinking. That's what they value. That's really what the anchor is of Google. So if you can continue to show your creative thinking, to show your resourcefulness, then you'll go far in terms of the interview process.
Okay, so another question for you around the types of backgrounds that people had who were breaking into Google. So it sounds like you hired mostly for, really technical roles.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think that, Google is kind of known for being a company that you can break into if you don't necessarily have that technical background. What was your experience with that? Did you see people with non-technical backgrounds able to break into Google?
I can't say that I did, but that's only the
Mhm.
only reason I would say that is because all of my recruiting was technical recruiting.
Right.
So in order for you to be hired for an RF engineer role, you would have needed
Hmm.
to be, working in some type of technical capacity. Now, when it comes
Hmm.
to the people operations side, excuse me, then they don't rely heavily on tech. Like I
Right.
said, for me, before recruiting at Google, I didn't do any tech recruiting. Every now and then at Aerotech, I would help to recruit an engineer role, but I was primarily focused on warehouse positions, manufacturing type of roles. So outside of those true technical positions, again, the engineers, software, hardware engineers, when it comes to the people operations side of things, no, they don't
Hmm.
require technical experience. Of course, it's always going to be a plus. If you're familiar with tech, it'll make for an easier onboarding experience. But
Hmm.
outside of that, again, really what they're looking for is the expertise in your field and then that creative problem solving, the collaboration, and that growth mindset.
Awesome. Okay, wonderful tips.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. All
problem.
right, so now I want to shift to today's job market, like overall. And
Mhm.
there are different ways that you can end up landing a role as a job seeker. There's the traditional, resume, cold application method, and then there's also, this networking approach and kind of the hidden job market that people don't
Mhm.
see.
Mhm.
Um, for you in your current role, what do you think is the main way that people are landing jobs today? Are you hiring mostly people through cold applications, or is it more through like the networking approach?
So it's a mix, to be honest,
Mhm.
and that's what I would encourage folks to employ when they're entering into their job search. So if you're only using the code application to find your next opportunity, you're going to miss out on the various other opportunities that are out there. So if you're not maximizing your LinkedIn, if you're not staying in contact with the folks that are in your industry, you may be missing out on some of those hidden job opportunities. And what we
Mm.
mean by hidden job opportunities are those roles that have not been posted externally yet, but a hiring manager knows that they need someone on their team. So before they
Mm.
even open that position, because you've been able to network and you have a conversation with that manager, you're one of the first people that they think of and they recommend for that role when it's posted. So you're getting ahead of the posting.
Right. So then how would you like what is your approach to getting a job through networking then?
Yeah, my approach to networking is to one focus on building connections. I always tell people to treat networking like a garden as opposed to a grocery store. And what I mean by that is, what I mean by that is networking relationships is something that you have to nurture. A lot of people enter into a networking call or networking session and they're so focused on what they want to get out of that networking call. I want my next job or I want my promotion. So that's all I'm going to focus on. When if you
Yeah.
really spend the time to get to know that person, what are some of the things they struggle with? How can you assist them? Then you're more likely to have that connection. And it may not come right after that call.
Yeah.
Reach out to them in a couple months just to check in on them. That problem that they said they had, reference that
Mhm.
in your follow up call because again, that helps to strengthen that relationship so that you are the first person that they think of when that
Mhm.
position comes available. So many
Awesome.
folks treat the networking calls very transactional.
Mm.
What do you have to offer me? What can I gain from speaking with you? When again, it's really about forming a true connection and relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of times the job seekers that I speak with, they don't know what to say. Like they want to start networking, but they don't know really how to approach it. Like who are we connecting with? What are we saying? If we get to the point of having a coffee chat with them, like what are we talking about there?
Yeah,
Do you have
yeah,
any tips around that?
yeah. I always advise people to one, get curious, ask great questions. One thing that both you and I know as recruiters is people love to talk about themselves. you know
Yes.
so you ask a couple good questions, direct questions, and they'll start opening the floodgates. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They get to talking. They tell you about what it's like working for whatever company they're working at, what it's been
Hmm.
like throughout their career, and then you can start to focus in on some of the things that you have in common. So
Yeah.
if they went to a certain school, if they studied a certain subject, then you can reference that and find ways to again build that true connection. So I always advise people to just get curious because again, people
Awesome.
love talking about themselves.
For sure. Okay, that
Yeah,
is great advice. Okay, so let's say, is it okay if I bring you through a hypothetical?
yeah, yeah, 100%.
So let's say there's a candidate who wants to really get in a certain company, a job
Hmm.
seeker, and there's no job posted right now. What specifically, like how, like what actionable advice could you give them on how to start nurturing relationships that
Hmm.
down the road could then, help them get their foot in the door?
Yeah, one, I would suggest one looking up the company on LinkedIn and trying to
Yeah.
see if you can find the folks that work in that company. So whether that one, I would first start with the HR folks and the recruiters that work there and say, hey, XYZ company has always been a goal of mine to work there, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about what the interview process is, what the work culture is, or the work-life balance is, just to learn a little bit more about the company. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
will say, us as recruiters, we're being flooded with messages day in, day out. So you may not
Yeah.
always get a response. However, continuing to reach out to some of those folks, you may get that one person who's willing to have that conversation. Now, on
Mm-hmm.
the other side of that, I would encourage you to reach out to folks who are in the career path that you're actually currently in, or in the job that you would like to pursue moving down the line. And again, just get curious. How did you land a role here at XYZ company? What do you enjoy about the work that you're doing? Because again, people are more than happy to help out and to lend a helping hand. And I'll say this over and over again, people love talking about themselves. So you get them talking about something that they're passionate about, and you get to asking
Yeah.
them questions. Tell me more about that. Like, what landed you here? What do you like about that? And that's really how you break into whatever company it may be, and to really create that conversation or create that connection.
Awesome. Yeah, and then I find too, I mean, when you start having those conversations, yes, people do like to talk about themselves, and over like in the course of human conversation, at some point they're going to ask you about you too.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
I mean, it would be awkward if they didn't, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then that's your opportunity to one, tell them a little bit about you, why you even wanted to have this conversation, what you liked about them. You know what I mean? People always
Hmm.
love to receive compliments, so don't be afraid to say, hey, I was very impressed by your career trajectory. I see you started out as a data analyst for only a couple years, and now you're a senior director of data strategy. Tell me a little bit more about how
Hmm.
you got there. I love to learn more about that. And then they'll ask you, okay, yeah, I just told you all about me. What sparked your interest in data?
Hmm.
So again,
Yeah.
always just focus on creating that connection. Don't focus on what you can get away from the conversation, because they may not have an opportunity right away.
Right.
But in 3 months, you know what I mean. When they do open that position, then again, you're one of the first people that they think of. And the last thing that I'll add about networking is in the conversation with how you can help them, how you can service them.
Mm.
So I always ask, what's something that you're working on right now that you're really struggling with? What's a big sticking point for you? And then I try to think, as they're describing that sticking point or that hurdle, I try to think of a solution. Because someone is always going to value solution oriented folks and someone who can solve their problem. So always ask, hey, is there something that I can help you out with? Is there something that you're struggling with right now, that I can assist with? Because they'll always remember
Awesome.
that.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, awesome nuggets. Yeah, great pieces of advice. So that being said, I would say, I mean, for me too, number one piece of advice is be networking. Always be networking. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll just outline the strategy for you right there. That
Mm-hmm.
being said, the resume and the cold application process is still important, and people are still landing jobs through cold applications. So it's great that we have a current recruiter on with us today to tell us, when you're sitting there in the recruiter's chair, you've got a new rec that you're looking to fill. What is it that stands out to you, and what do you like to see on people's resumes?
Yeah, so I like to break it into three buckets. So one would be, of course, formatting. So I like to make sure that there are no errors, that it's easy to read. It's no more than roughly about 2 pages. And then once I move
Mhm.
past the formatting, then it's really about relevance. And I'm sure people have heard this over and over again about tailoring their resume and the keywords in the
Mm,
resume. And
yeah.
especially right now with the huge focus on AI and trying to optimize your resume to make it past the AI. But I want to just break it down to folks that that's always been the case. We've always looked at keywords. So if you're not tailoring your resume to this specific position, you're going to miss out on a great opportunity, especially if it's an
Mm,
opportunity that you're very excited about. So that's one thing that I
right.
always tell my clients is, you don't have to tailor your resume to every job that you apply to. I know you're applying to hundreds of jobs, and let's be realistic, you can't tailor. You're not going to have 100 different resumes. But for those positions that you're very excited about, that this would be the perfect position for you, go through that job description. Really look at some of the key words that they mentioned and the responsibilities and some of those key skills or requirements or qualifications, and make sure that you have those in your resume. And I also want to be clear when I say tailor your resume to the job description, I'm not saying to copy the job description word for word. I've had candidates do that where they send me their resume and I look at it and I look at the job description and it's almost word for word, the job
Yeah.
description. And then at that point,
Okay.
I'm questioning if you even have the actual experience, you know?
Mm, right.
So
Yeah,
that
more of a
that's
red
one thing.
flag.
Exactly, exactly. So that's one
Yeah.
thing that I'm looking at. So one, the format, the relevance, some of those keywords, and then lastly, the impact that you have with the companies that you've worked for. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by impact is what things changed because of you. Did you improve a process?
Yeah.
Did you make something more efficient? What truly changed because of you? And the reason that I emphasize impact is because let's say I'm hiring for a data analyst. There are 1,000 other data analysts who are doing the exact same work that you're doing, but they don't all
Mm,
have the same impact that you have. That's what's really going to distinguish you from these other 500 resumes that we receive. And that's one thing that job seekers have to think about is that these other positions, again, we're receiving hundreds of applications, especially in today's market. So you have to think about ways that you can really separate yourself from the rest of the pack. And again, that's
mm-hmm.
going to be through your relevance, so tailoring your resume and being able to show impact on your resume.
And in just a few words, like how can people show impact? Like how can they get that, like convey that to you in the few seconds that you have to review the resume?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is the metrics. So making sure that you have metrics in your resume to say, hey, I created X and it resulted in X, or
Mm-hmm.
increased X because I created X. So again, you really want to make sure that you have metrics in your resume to again let us understand and quantify the impact that you have. If you started and I'm just spitballing here, but if you started a resource group because you wanted to improve the employee experience, make sure that you
Yeah.
mention that in your resume because not everyone in HR is doing that same project or has that same impact. So again, some of those wins that you have experienced in your current role, make sure that that's in your resume, and not only in your resume but on your LinkedIn, which is something
Awesome.
that I also want to make sure that we speak about today. I often come across LinkedIn pages where they only list their job title and they don't have the details of what they're actually doing day to day or some of the impact they've had at their company, and that essentially makes you invisible to recruiters because we use LinkedIn with a combination of keywords, of course, job titles. And if you don't have those keywords or skills in your resume or, excuse me, on your LinkedIn, then again, you're not pulling in that search and you're essentially
Yeah.
just making your job search harder.
Yeah. It's like making yourself, like putting out the lights, right? Like flashing lights, like, hi, this is what I
Exactly.
do. If you don't put
Exactly.
words, we're not finding you.
Exactly. Exactly. And I can't tell you the amount of LinkedIn pages that simply only have their job title. And most folks may
Yeah.
think that's all I need. I just want people to know what I'm doing. But they're constantly on the
Mhm.
job market and they're wondering why they're not being contacted by recruiters. That's why. You don't have the details on your
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I also feel like today, you touched on the topic of customized resumes. There are so many tools out there today that people can use to like get all these like really highly customized resumes out there in their job applications. And I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think like if I were sitting in the recruiter's chair today, I feel like I would be clicking on that LinkedIn profile because, like you said, you get a resume and it's like literally the job description just kind of regurgitated back to you. So
100%.
how do I know that this person even does this? So I would like personally, I think I'd be always clicking on that at least before I invite them to an interview.
Exactly. And the worst thing to happen is when you click on that LinkedIn and it's something completely different, you know,
Yeah,
where, you don't have those same details. You don't have that same impact, or sometimes it's not even the same job title. And if it's
right,
not worse, we're going to screen you out at that point. But
right.
make sure again that you have those same details on your LinkedIn, because that's one thing that we're continuously looking at. I can have
Hmm.
500 applications for this one position, but if I don't see that right fit, then the first place I go is to LinkedIn to find that right candidate. One other thing that actually came to mind, you mentioned using AI to create your resume. I think it's great. Use AI to create your resume, but also be sure that you're prepared to talk through your resume if you are selected for an interview. I've had it a couple times where this resume looks great. I call this candidate, ask them about some of the things on their resume, and they're unable to talk about it in any fashion because they use whatever the AI is, let's say ChatGPT, to create
Right.
it. So make sure
Yeah.
that you're familiar, make sure that you're reviewing your resume. I've seen double bullet points lately with the ChatGPT resumes. So again, make sure
Yeah.
you're reviewing it and you're not just trusting AI to fill out all your applications for you.
Right. With a lot of times with my clients, like I like to be quite AI forward. So a lot of times when I'm working with my job seekers, I do have them set up like a GPT to get their resume ready for them. But I always say, guys, number one, the reason that you're gonna have problems with your resume is if your GPT doesn't know stuff about you. So you gotta
Mhm,
give it a lot of information so that it can give you a good output. And then number two, this is not a copy paste scenario, my friends.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
We are
mhm,
not literally just copying, pasting
mhm,
whatever
mhm.
ChatGPT said.
Yep.
It is always like a review process. And I would
Mhm,
also encourage you guys, if you're using tools out there, always be reviewing it because the stuff I've seen from some job seekers using tools that I'm not going to name right now, whoa.
mhm, mhm, mhm. 100%,
No
100%.
copy paste.
I'll never forget a recent resume actually that I received. I clicked his LinkedIn and it took me actually to the AI that he was using instead instead of his LinkedIn. So always make sure. Yeah, I had to give him that feedback. I'm of course feedback driven. I was like, hey, I appreciate this, but just so that you know, this is where that your LinkedIn link is taking me to the AI. So make sure that you update
You
that.
know, and that is really nice of you because that's honestly just extra work for you. You do not need to. And this is the type of recruiter that like we as job seekers like we want. Will,
Exactly.
you are the recruiter for the people.
Exactly. No, that's 100%. That is 100% it. I've actually received that question in interviews previously for other recruiter roles. They asked me, "Are you a candidate focused recruiter or hiring manager focused recruiter?" And
Oh.
honestly, one, I'll say I don't think there's a right answer, and it was a tough question that I wasn't prepared to receive. But I honestly went with my gut, and I went with the truth, and that is that I am a candidate recruiter. Because
Mm-hmm.
if the candidate isn't the right fit for the position, if this isn't the right fit for them, they're not going to stick around. They're going to be looking for their next position. So I'd rather
Right.
make sure that it makes sense for them, that this recruitment process is an enjoyable, pleasant experience for them. Because again, I want
Mm.
them to stick around, and ultimately, I want to be able to help them. And that's why I got into recruiting. I didn't get into
Oh,
recruiting because I was passionate about building organizations. That's something that came with it. I was passionate about helping other folks. And that's what, again, led me into recruiting and coaching.
wonderful. I have one more question for you about AI before we kind of go into your coaching that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talked a little bit about using AI for like on the candidate side. What about using AI on the recruiter side, and how AI is working together with ATS systems? So there is a
Mhm.
lot of noise out there, a lot of misconceptions. Like, what is something like if you wanted to clear up like one misconception for job seekers out there around AI use, what would it be?
I would say the biggest misconception is that every company or most companies are using AI to automatically reject you, and that you're receiving auto rejections because of AI. Right
Mm,
now, AI is really being used to rank candidates in terms of the ATS system. So it'll show me the strength of this resume compared to the job description. But a recruiter is still going in to review your resume.
hmm.
So most of the time, AI isn't automatically rejecting you. Outside of that, it's really just more of an efficiency thing when it comes to AI and how AI is being used in recruiting. So it's being used to schedule interviews instead of
Hmm.
me taking the time to look through everyone's calendar and finding a time that works for everyone. We're now using AI to review the calendar and tell us the times that work.
Awesome.
Or if there are common questions, hiring questions, then we're using the AI bot to answer those questions. But
Mm,
right now, most interviewers or most folks in the talent acquisition or recruiting space are still putting eyes on resumes, still talking to candidates one on one. I do like the emphasis on optimizing your resume because that puts a focus on tailoring your resume, which should have been a focus all along. Just
mm.
like AI, us as recruiters, we're looking for those keywords. When we're scanning 100, 200, 300 resumes, we have to look at those keywords. We have to get an initial feel for your resume before we move on to the next phone screen stage. So whether it's AI or recruiter, always make sure you have those key terms in your resume.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for clearing that up.
No problem. Nope. I hear that all the time. I hear that all the time, and I tell people, you have a question that you asked me earlier, and it was, what is it that you would say is the hot topic right now, or the hot button
Yeah.
area? And of
Yeah.
course, it's AI and recruiting. And I always tell
Right.
people, if you focus so much on trying to optimize your resume for AI, you may miss out on that hidden opportunity that you could discover through networking.
Yeah.
So yes, AI is a tool. AI is being integrated into recruiting just like it is for the rest of the world, but the structure of recruiting and hiring hasn't changed.
Wonderful. Okay. Great. Well, that being said, I mean, you've given us so many like great nuggets already. I think a lot of people out there would probably like to be in contact with you and to hear some more about your tips and your perspective on the job search. So that being said, can you tell us a little bit about the coaching that you do and the work that you do with candidates?
Yeah. So the coaching that I do is typically focused on mid career folks, and
Hmm.
either mid career folks who are looking to make a completely new career pivot, where they're looking to do something completely different, or those folks who are at the individual contributor level and they're wanting to move into the leadership role. And so I'm helping them prepare for those leadership interviews, uncover some of those leadership skills that they may not even be aware of, so that they're really putting their best foot forward. And then for the folks that are making that career pivot, a lot of the times I'm focusing on the clarity piece. So understanding you have a clear vision on where you're looking to go. And
Hmm.
then we're working on strategy. So once you have a clear vision on where you're looking to go, are you tailoring your resume? How are you
Hmm.
preparing for interviews? Are you networking? What type of networking opportunities are you exploring? So then we work on the strategy piece. And then lastly, it's that confidence piece.
Hmm.
And I just mentioned it, but we go through mock interviews where I'll ask them the same questions that I would ask in a typical interview and then give them feedback on that as well.
Wonderful. So I think everybody would probably like to have Will in their corner.
Yeah, if you're interested, feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to
Awesome.
help.
So I'll definitely be linking your LinkedIn profile in the description. And so today I'm wanting to end on a hot take. So Will James, we want to hear what is your hot take for job seekers who are looking to land their next role right now?
Hot take.
Make it spicy.
I I already mentioned it, but I'll say it again. If you focus your entire job search on trying to optimize your resume to bypass the AI and you lose or you miss out on those networking opportunities, that's going to be the detriment to your job search.
Yeah,
The further that we move into the digital age, the ability to effectively communicate and networking will be that top skill that's invaluable.
right.
Many folks in today's age, again, digital age, is really losing the ability to effectively communicate, to effectively establish relationships. So if you're able to do that again effectively, that's going to make a world of difference.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a fantastic way to end. So, that being said, thank you so much, Will, for coming on my podcast today. I really appreciate it. I think that everybody out there is getting a lot out of your insights. And, guys, you have heard it here first. Will James, recruiter for the candidates.
Recruiter for the candidates. I'm for the people. I'm for the people. But thanks for having me, Emily.
Thank
You're
you
doing,
so
and I
much.
just want to say you're doing great work. We've been in contact, like you said, since the beginning of the year, and just to see how forward facing you are in terms of interacting with the people, really being an advocate for the candidates that you work with. You sent me some great candidates, and I can tell that you're passionate about helping the folks that are in your corner, or some of the folks that some of the clients. You're very passionate about
Oh,
helping them, and you really have their back. So always happy to stay in contact with you and continuing nurturing this relationship.
thank you so much, Will. Well, I know this won't be our last conversation, and hopefully also not our last conversation on the podcast. So
Oh,
we'll
definitely
be
will
in
not
touch.
do. I hope to return for sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks again.
All right. See ya.